Morning. Welcome to session 3 in the extended series of me wittering about human factors and performance in retrieval medicine. We've had 2 sessions so far, and we've had the opportunity to go into some of the concepts that underpin the different aspects of human factors, both as it's practiced in the wider human factors community and also as it's practiced in our field of retrieval medicine. And this is the kind of the wheel of the whole of human factors and ergonomics that we identified back in session 1, where we just talked about how the interaction of humans and work, that's human factors. The interaction of complex humans with complex work is real-world human factors, and the interaction of complex variable humans with complex variable work is our reality. And actually, whether we as humans interact with the computers we use, whether we react with the equipment we use, that's ergonomics, whether we interact with the systems of an organization that we work in, that's organizational human factors, or how we react with each other in teams and under pressure, and that's CRM and cognitive psychology. All of these are part of human factors, and human factors is good and it's working when work is easy and fun. It should be easy and fun to do work. That shows that the human factors is working. When work is difficult and unfun, often it's because we haven't got the human factors of how our systems work correct. And in the first 2 sessions, we looked a lot at how we process information, how we manage cognitive load, how we receive information and deal with it, and then a bit about how teams behave and how we can influence the performance of teams. This third session, we're going to talk about us as individual performers, and what are some of the skills that we can steal from other places to help us interact with complexity and difficulty ourselves. Now, I'm definitely not talking to you about this because I perceive that I'm particularly good at performance, but it's an area that I am really interested in, and I wanted to give you in this third session perhaps just a bit of the narrative of how I ended up in this place and how that led me to find things that I thought were relevant to our work. And the story for me started really here, slightly different building, slightly different part of the airport, 10 years ago, when I did induction here back in 2010. And that was the first time, I think, in medical training that I experienced something that felt very much like the coaching that I'd experienced as quite a middling athlete when I was younger. Medicine is full of training and medicine is full of teaching, but this was the first time that I'd experienced what I thought was coaching. And I thought that was quite interesting. So I wrote to the AIS, the Australian Institute of Sport, and said, I am a registrar in New South Wales for a bit, and I've seen the relevance of coaching to our medical practice. I wonder if it'd be possible to come down and have a look at some coaching and see what's going on. And the sport that I'd been in was the sport of rowing, which I appreciate is a bit niche. And they said, oh, great, we've got our women's lightweight national squad train in Sydney, so we'll connect you up. And I went down to UTS Boathouse in Iron Cove and met a really amazing coach, a woman called Ellen Randell, who was one of those people that's so good at what they do, that they're so confident in what they do, that they're totally open about what they do. So I started riding out on the bay with Ellen and working with some of her athletes. And then after a while, Ellen was like, well, I actually need an assistant. And do you want to do some coaching and I'll help you be a coach? And that wasn't really the plan that we come to Australia for our year out with. It was more like visit Ayers Rock and go to Darwin and go to the beach. And so our family plan split a little bit in that my wife Julianne went to Ayers Rock and went to Darwin, and I ended up spending quite a lot of time on the Nepean River with what turned out to be the Australian women's quad, which is 4 athletes for the 2011 Worlds, which is an unusual first coaching gig. And it was fascinating to see what a high performance environment really looks like and how do you train athletes to deliver performance. So we went back to London. There's just some evidence that it really was me. we went back to London, and the goal was in 2012 to do three things. Well, it wasn't the goal necessarily, but one goal was to do the fellowship. Another goal was to complete our last year of training, and then as it turns out, the third goal was to have our first child. And then a fourth goal, surprise, came in from the side, because a couple of weeks after we'd been back, I was in the pub in Putney by the river, having promised Julianne that was it with the coaching, and someone said, "You should really meet this person." I ended up meeting one of the most impressive individuals I've ever met, someone who's ended up being the godmother to the kid that arrived, and who we then, as a family, really went on a journey with for 4 years. And this person was Charlotte Taylor, and she was way too old to start any sport. She was 26, and she'd moved to London, and she'd done a learn to row program to really meet people, and had caught the bug. And she was at a club, the club that I'd been a member of, called Putney Town, that had no high performance program, didn't actually have a women's coach, had never sent an athlete to a national or international race. And the men's coach said, "You know what, this person is in a single scull, and she keeps following us up and down the river, trying to get some coaching off me. She's really determined." She was too short, her arms are like a little dinosaur, and she was 26 at the beginning of her athletic career. And we were in 2012. So we got back, and we'd just been to see the 2012 Olympics, and actually I'd met Charlie at the 2012 Olympics, and she said, "I want to go to the Olympics." And it posed a really interesting question, because what she had was coachability and determination and a willingness to do what was necessary to try and achieve an exciting goal. And I had a year of medicine, a promise that I would stop coaching, and lots of other things to do. But there was a really interesting question, which was, what if you took the brakes off? What if you did absolutely everything right? What if you, one-on-one rather than a big squad, achieved the most rapid rate of improvement you could? Is it possible to go from beginner to Olympics in 4 years? So we thought we'd give it a go. And our starting point was this: too old, too short, coach who's never been in any system, club that has not got a high performance program, no boat, it's quite important. She did have a boat. She'd got a boat that she bought for £500. It was 12 years old, and it was basically made out of slices of cheese laminated with jam. It was the soggiest thing you can imagine, but the right attitude. So this process started, and we set about trying to make sure that every day we just got the most of what was possible out of every day. Now, she had a job and I had a job, and I had a HEM secondment coming and then a second HEM secondment coming. And we didn't have a lot of time, and she didn't have any money. So we had to really try and get as much out of 5 in the morning and 7 at night as the people we were going to be competing with were getting out of full-time training. We had to try and identify all the different aspects of performance and try and get as far as we could with each one, whether it is nutrition or sleep or support or weights or physiology. And we had to be the best we possibly could at learning, because we had no time. So this is the River Thames in London, and those sprint pieces you can see her doing there, well, they speak to something I'm going to show you again a bit later. Nobody was there to support this program apart from her friends and some supported people in the club. So there was aspects that we had to build ourselves. We had to get the best training program we could find. We had to build a physiology gym. I had to learn how to do lactate curves. We snuck our way in to other people's gyms to try and mix some equipment. We went to Belgium a lot because that's the cheapest place you can go to training camp. And the whole purpose was to try and get to a point where she could demonstrate enough speed that the national team would be interested enough to give her a chance to get to the point where she could get in what was the only boat for lightweight women that's available at the Olympics. So it's not like swimming where you can win 8 medals by having like front crawl, backstroke, side stroke, whatever it is. For lightweight women, there is one event. It's a 2-person boat. Britain had won the gold medal at 2012. One of the athletes had retired, the other one had carried on. So it's pretty clear that that person was going to be in the boat for Rio. So there was one seat available, and there were a lot of people in that seat. We managed to get some sponsorship. We used the sponsorship to go on a training camp in Portugal just before the national trials. This is Portugal, which is where the British national team go for their training camp, because we wanted to try and get every advantage that was possible. Jules was 3rd trimester at this point. It wasn't the holiday that she had necessarily planned, but the 3 of us went off to Portugal. And rowing is a particularly brutal sport because every time you take a stroke, you have an opportunity to stop. Because you push and relax and you start from 0, you've got to make yourself push again. So learning yourself and learning your body and learning what you're capable of, learning how the cup empties when you empty up your power, and particularly, and I think this is relevant to us, learning how to deliver something that is very effective when you are in a state of distress. Because that's how you win. You win by holding form and being effective and being efficient in your movements when you're in a state of extreme fatigue. Now, a rowing race goes for 2,000 meters. It lasts for about 6 minutes. And at the end of that 2,000 meter piece, if you take someone's lactate, which obviously we did quite a lot, you'll have a lactate of about 21, 22. You have an undetectable bicarb. You have a pH of less than 7. Now, that is obviously a different physiological state to our patients. But if you imagine trying to do something where a key component of it is relaxing with a lactate of 21, you can kind of see some of the challenges. And learning how to be effective in that environment was a big part for her. We started to get on the radar. We started to get access to some more advanced testing, some more opportunities for monitoring, and the coaches started to notice. But the entry point to the team is trials. And when you turn up to trials, you usually turn up with your high-performance squad and your high-performance coach. And the national team coaches already know who you are, because the job of the national team is to know who's going to be in their crews in 4 years and in 8 years' time. They're tracking these people. They're on a performance pathway. And you can imagine what happened when we turned up to trials in my old battered 206 with a single skull on the roof that was made out of cheese laminated with jam from a club that they didn't know. When you're too short, people weren't interested. The only way that they were going to be interested is if she won everything that they put in front of her. And somehow, after 2 years of this program, Charlie got selected to race at the European Championships. This was while I was working for London Hems. So I had this very bizarre situation where I was taking everyone's night shifts off them so that I could finish a night shift, drive to Reading and coach at the National Centre during the day. And then I had to persuade the boss of London Hems to give me a long weekend so we could go to Serbia to go to the European Championships. And it was really explicit that she was in the lightweight single at the European Championships. This is our lowest priority boat. We're just interested in you enough that, and you perform well enough that we are willing to select you and let you race, but we've got no expectations. And so this was her first international race. She was racing in a boat that we'd managed to crowdfund. And so this boat had gone from Putney Town, which is a social rowing club, and had a GB sticker slapped on it, and been trucked to Serbia. And her first proper senior race was the European Championships. And she came 4th, which was unexpected. And what that prompted was opportunities, which we'll talk about in a minute. So let's talk a bit about rowing. We're going to talk maybe about coaching in another session, because that's a really interesting topic. But if you wanted to be a rowing coach, it's actually pretty simple, because there's only really 3 variables in a rowing race. There's how much power you've got, which reflects the work you've done. It reflects the time in the gym. It's your physiology. It's the engine that you've built. And the point about power is you can't have any more on the day of the race. You can't eat a fourth Weetabix and have some more power. So you go into race day carrying what you have earned. Technique is how good you are at turning your power into speed. In our sport, or in running. Tennis, it might be how good you are getting your power into ball speed. In cricket, it might be how good you are at turning your power into a precise stroke. There's lots of different aspects to technique, but the point is that if your technique's not good, it doesn't matter how much power you've got. But what's also true is that when you go to a race, you've kind of got what you've got. It reflects the learning you've done, the iteration you've been through, and the idea you've got in your head of what good looks like, but you can't have some more on race day. Race day is a really bad time to invent a new kind of rowing. So you've got what you've got. So performance is the only variable factor. Performance is how good you are at getting your best power and your best technique into the race today. It's a what's happening now component. And it is a variable, which means that there are people who win regularly who don't have the best power, don't have the best technique, but are the best at getting what they've got into the race. And when you go into a high-performance organisation like an Olympic team or a Premiership club, the organisation is very focused on helping people deliver performance because it's their jobs on the line, right? I mean, we all accept that nobody's really interested in rowing, but the one time they might be interested in rowing is once every 4 years. And so your 4 years of your career is defined by what your athlete does for 5 minutes once every 4 years. And so they're very invested in understanding and supporting performance. So how does that relate to us? Well, I think for us, kind of power is knowledge. It's the work you've done. It's the work you've done over time. It's the stores you have built up. But when the helicopter lifts, it's hard to have some more knowledge. We might have knowledge about how to access knowledge, but if you don't know it, you can't see it. It's what you've got. Technique for us might be all sorts of things. Technique might be a technical skill, but it might also be interacting with a scene. It might be getting good information out of the right people. It might be making things happen. There's lots of technical and non-technical skills that I think would fit under the heading of technique. But the day of the race is a bad time to invent a new kind of thoracotomy. You've got what you've got. So for us as well, performance is the variable that we hold in our hand. How good can I be at getting my best knowledge and my best technique to this patient right now in front of me? Essentially, do you know how to do it? Are you able to do it? That's important. But can you do it when it counts? And that's what our induction program is all about, isn't it? It's about equipping people not to do it in an OSCE or describe it, but to be confident to do it when it's really important. So here's our project. We're in London. It's 2012. We know we've got to get to Rio 2016. We can't get any taller. The arms are still too short. We've got to figure out how we're going to get from one to the other. But it's not a 4-year project, because if you're not medaling at the World Championships the year before, you're pretty unlikely to be medaling at the Olympics. And you're pretty unlikely to be selected, because as a national team, you want to know who your best athletes are at least a year out. So it's not good enough to make the squad in 2015. You've got to be at the top of the squad. So a 4-year project is actually a 3-year project. And if you're going to be at the top of the squad, you're not going to arrive and go in at the top. So you need to have been in for a year. You need to have been racing at international events. This needs to not be your first rodeo. You need to have learned how you are going to perform in those environments, which means you actually need to make the team in 2014. So this is now a 2-year project. And if you're going to make the team, you can't just rock up. You need to have a track record of performance, because most of the people they're looking at, they have been tracking for 8 years. So you've actually got to build a national record of performance. You need to be winning the national championships in 2013. So that's now 18 months. And we've definitely got to track back and do the whole bit where you learn how to do it at the start. And there's a physiology component to this as well, which is that Olympic athletes are pretty fit. And if you've sat on our ergometer here, and you've had to go at 2,000 meters, so a lightweight woman, which means average crew weight of 57 kilos, needs to be under 7 minutes for 2K, 2,000 meters, which is not a number I've seen when I've done it for quite a while now. And where we started was roughly 8 minutes 10, because Charlie had some underlying fitness. She'd been a cross-country runner. Like, she wasn't unfit, but she didn't have the specific strength and conditioning components that she needed to deliver over 2,000 meters. And 2,000 meters is an arse of a distance because you can't sprint it, you can't stay aerobic. You essentially have to decide how far over your anaerobic threshold you are willing to be so that you can still perform at the end. So we had to do that. And the problem is, you can't cheat physiology. You do the best training program you can. You try and track how you're doing. You use all the information available. You tweak the training program. But in the end, the body has to go through a cycle of challenge, stress, response, improve, challenge, stress, response, improve. And really with physiology, you need to have someone with the right genetics. And then as the coach, you need to just not mess it up. And you have to wait for it to happen because it won't happen straight away. So if we've got to be winning national championships 18 months after we start, we can't do that with a 7-minute ergometer score because it's not going to happen in that time scale. What about technique? You can learn fast. But this is a new skill and it has to be executed at a very high standard. And a lot of coaching is about exploration. We had to find what works for her. How do we make it work for someone with tiny arms who's not very tall? How do we find her strengths and lever to her strengths? How do we build resiliency in her technique? We can improve faster than other people can, but this is still a long project. This is where performance came in, because what we realized was there is no barrier to learning about performance. And there is a significant advantage to getting very good very quickly at the performance component, so that whatever stage you're at, you are bringing the best of what you've got to the challenges in front of you. And that improves rapidly. 2 years into the project, the national team invited her to come to the National Training Centre for a fun Christmas regatta, which is their way of looking at units, where they mixed up all the Olympic athletes and you race against all sorts of people. And Charlie ended up, so imagine going to this National Training Centre, you've come from this daggy, lovely, but daggy, fun social club to this pristine training centre. You know you're being scrutinised, you know you've worked really hard to get here, and the person in the lane next to her was the Olympic champion in the fun regatta. There's lots of ways you can approach that. Now, the Olympian was having fun, but in her first race she beat the Olympian, not because she had better power and not because she had better technique, but she was focused on doing what she needed to do. So that leads us to the term performance, because performance gets quite a bad rap. If someone comes and says, Carl, can we just have a chat about your performance? I mean, there's no circumstance where that's a reassuring...
Especially when it's his wife saying, Again?
Yeah. But I find those debrief sessions quite helpful, though, so it's good. If you work in a hospital... Yeah. One team. If you work in a hospital and the manager wants to come and talk about a department's performance, well, they actually want to talk about some outcomes. They want to talk about some KPIs. If somebody has a performance review, what it usually means is we're not happy with the outcomes of what you're doing. But that is not what performance is. We need to rehabilitate the term performance. Performance is doing the things you need to do to get the outcome you want. Performance is a now thing, not an outcomes thing. Did you perform is not the same question as did you win. Did you perform is did you do what you set out to do? And the question for us as coaches is how can we do what we set out to do? So there's a basic rule, which is that you can't have a discussion of human factors without something from aviation and something from Formula One. And we're going to challenge ourselves on one of those. But this is a landing of a plane, and I don't know if anyone can see anything wrong with this plane. It is indeed missing a wheel. So this was a Virgin flight that took off to go to America, got over the English Channel, realised that not all the wheels were up, did a bit of a circle around, did a flyby past the tower at Gatwick to see what people could see, got told the wheels weren't up, and then came in and absolutely nailed it. And we talk a lot when we talk about CRM and human factors about understanding what goes wrong. But it's interesting to think about what goes right. What enabled those pilots to do something that no doubt they had practiced in the sim? No doubt they had the knowledge to do, and no doubt they had the technique to do. But in that moment, what enabled them to successfully do that? And so the first kind of performance question to think about is this: your performance state. So Claire asked the question at the beginning of induction to people, what puts you in your flow state? And I think that it's a similar question, and it's definitely an individual thing about what do you feel like and what do you look like when you're really on it. If you think about the best case you have done, the one that you walked away going, that came together. And if you think about performance as doing the things you need to do to get the outcome you want, when you reflect on the case, the first question is, what state was I in? Where did I get myself to do that thing really well? But then the better question is, what did I do to get myself in that state? So I wonder if we can just pause for a second and just consider some different aspects of the performance state. In fact, before I tell you what I think, what are the different components when you think about your best performance state that describe the place you're in? Sorry, Ross.
As I get older, I do process.
So could we just, I think it's reasonable, could we describe that as like comfort? That kind of speaks to ergonomics, doesn't it? A little bit. What about?
Coffee, and I'm going to say next.
Why does coffee put you in a performance state?
It makes me awake. There's definitely a comfort kind of feeling. I'm sure there is a psychological barrier to that need for coffee in the morning to function. And again, Phil giving me that coffee this morning has helped me the team state, knowing that there's support there as well.
Yeah, I think I feel less anxious when I've had coffee because I now know that I've had coffee.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's plenty of physiological stuff that may not be robustly evidence-based, but it's about your arousal state and your physiology that prepares you to do a task.
Yep.
And that can be variable depending on the task. I think it would be remiss not to mention that and talk about that, but we also have some sort of semi-autonomous control over physiological priming.
Yeah, do you think you do that?
Absolutely.
What do you do to get yourself in a performance state?
Well, it depends on the task that I'm doing. If you look at the athletes warming up for the NBA, almost universally they have a pair of sponsored, high expensive headphones on, and they're doing their same ritual and their same sorts of things, but they're listening to particular types of music or they're doing particular types of things to do that. And I think that is directly analogous to when you walk into ED if you're part of the trauma call and what you're doing is a good survey in your head or you're thinking about downs and that sort of stuff. But you're also, and I've deliberately been trained to try and do this and get to register us with this, is thinking about where you're at, your heart rate and your mind space and what else you need to get out of your head might be distracted from what you now need to perform.
Yeah. I think it's really important to have a sense of where you want to get to.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we think about it, we think about trying not to be something, which is really hard. I must not be stressed. I must not be anxious. What were you going to say?
It's similar thought to what Jeff had. There's that optimal level of arousal that we want to be on, that arousal curve that's sort of learn about. So you want to have some arousal to be ready to perform and not be so anxious or agitated that you can't function clearly. And so, like Jeff said, whatever you need to do if you are feeling anxious about the situation, to try to bring yourself back on that curve, that level of arousal for function. So for me, I like to breathe, like breathing exercises. I'm nervous about something. Controlling physiology.
What's on this
Something
bit?
that I or and even my point of view things is sometimes it's discussion in the group or even the use of humour. And yeah, I was wondering whether you had any specific cognitive sort of process that is something you often do.
I think there's probably a bunch of stuff that I don't even realise that I do.
Yeah.
And part of that is about your own physical presence, what you want to portray, what you're dealing with on the inside, what the mix of performances that you want the performance of the team to reflect your performance as well, which may sort of stretch what Tom's maybe trying to achieve here. But I mean, do you want to talk about this in terms of performance as well as personal performance? I think part of that process, if you're the main player on the stage, if you're the team leader, or if you're the key sort of prime NBA basketball player that's going to carry the team, you need to portray a certain performance to be able to get the team to perform at the next level as well. We regularly do this when we turn up on scene. If you're the doctor on the medical team setting up, you have a central role to portray what you want to get in the outcome of the station. So it's something that I've been talking about trying to play with for years. Since not necessarily great at it, but playing with it. But the other thing is also to play with the aspects when you are fatigued, when you are tired, or you are distracted, or there's lots of other shit going on, and actually have the ability to be able to reflect on that, to learn from it, to see whether your performance is great or what areas of your performance is great as well.
So we're going to talk about you in your best state, your absolute best state, your top performance state. So can anyone describe what do you think other people see? If we think about confidence, what do other people see when you are at your most optimally confident about what you're going to do? What would they notice? What does it look like? You have to mime it, but just what would they see?
I don't know, I guess you are confident in your approach, how you're standing, how you look.
Probably appear relaxed.
Yeah, I think that's good, isn't it?
I think you're comfortable where you are. You look like you have, I think you look like you have an awareness of what's going on in your common being, that you're like comfortable with it.
I quite often think I want to look like I want to be there, especially if you turn up and everyone there is looking like they really wish they weren't there because it's all going wrong. Actually, through your body language and your speech pattern, everything, making you look like you want to be there. What about emotion? What emotions do you associate with you in your best performance state?
You're enjoying what you're doing. You're having fun. This is actually a process that you don't want to stop doing.
You've got your shit in the ball.
Yeah.
It's positively stimulating, so it's arousing in an exciting way.
Like contentment, so happiness in the situation, so content, that I can make a contribution and help.
Similarly, kind of helps to click and not distracted.
Well, let's talk about that. It's kind of focus, isn't it? So what does it feel like when your focus is right? Yeah, it feels like there's a right speed, isn't it? Everything is happening at the right speed to me. I've got time to get the information I need, but I'm able to do the things I want to do. And I suppose we're all kind of describing a similar thing in terms of what we think our ideal performance state is, but that's not really the question for the athletes. The question for well, it is an important question, but the question to the athletes is, what do you do? What do you actively do to get yourself in the performance state? Because if you don't know how you get yourself in that state, then you're essentially hoping that the sport gods smile on you in that moment. There is now an element of chance, and there is not a level of confidence that I know what I'm going to do. So we're going to talk about some different techniques. It's a bit like a menu, I guess. Different things work for different people. But the point about all these things is you can't just bring them out of the box when you need them. We don't do other things without practicing them. And one of the reasons we practice them is that we know how we're going to do it. But another reason we practice them is that we gain confidence that I know these things are going to work to put me in the right performance state. One of the things we've worked with athletes a lot is triggers. So I describe the state I want to be in. You can't be in that state the whole time, because if you think about an athlete coming into the race, you want them to have high confidence in what they're going to do, a strong sense of enjoyment of delivering the very best they can, a sense of challenge, a sense that they're going to make the other person hurt. Probably not totally applies to us.
Not always.
Yeah, that they're absolutely in the moment. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And that their level of arousal is strong but positive, and they're focused on where they want to be. But that's not where you can live your life. Like, you can't go to the shops like that. So you've got to find a way of turning it on. And one of the things we worked with them is to try and find out, what is your mental trigger? Is it touching the boat? Let's describe the state we're going to be in. Let's use a mental trigger. The moment you pick the boat up to lift it on your shoulders, how good are we at getting into the mindset we want to be? What are the things that are going to help us do that? So that every training session is building that skill and that muscle. Can I go back to the... Yeah. So sports science is a tricky subject for science, because athletes don't want to be studied. They don't want to be studied because they're busy, and they don't want to be studied because they don't want to give an advantage to somebody else. And they're also, at an elite level, a very small group of people, and they're quite heterogeneous. So it's hard to do this work. But I think there's a link at the bottom if you want to have a look at this paper. A cohort study by Collins looked at 3 groups of athletes across a range of sports, super champions, serially successful at the highest level. Jess Ennis, Mo Farah, David Beckham. Internationals who are serially winning gold medals. They looked at champions, people who touched the peak once, never quite got it again. And they looked at almosts, people who were on the pathway, who were really good, who were in League One football teams, who had done junior worlds and got junior world medals, but somehow never quite made it. And they did structured interviews with this group of people. And the underlying premise is they were trying to figure out what happens in your youth that prepares you for this kind of, there's a paradigm out there that says that, oh yes, a lot of elite athletes have got trauma in their background and this drives them. And they were trying to understand that. And what they found was actually quite marked differences between the super champs, the people who were serially able to deliver. So there wasn't luck to this. They were winning, and the other 2 groups. And what they described was, firstly, they loved what they did, just as we described. They got enjoyment from the process, from the act of doing this thing as well as it could be done, which meant for them, training, which was about curiosity and discovery, was the same as racing. The only difference was, great, I've now got all these other people to create a really interesting test for me to see how good I can be. Their response to setbacks was really different, because all athletes get injured, all athletes have discouragement. We get discouragement, we get personal and system failures. But their response to setbacks was very different to the other group. They had an internal locus of control. They were able to say, okay, this is where I am today. What is the best thing I can do with what I've got right now? The opposite of an internal locus of control, I control what happens to me, is an external locus of control. These other guys, the system, my coaches, they determine the physiotherapist wasn't very good. And their reward motivation was very different, in that they didn't actually care where they came. And I thought what was really interesting as a coach joining the national team for a year was that in the middle of the Olympiad, you could kind of see who was going to win the medals and who wasn't. These people were all amazing. They were all funded athletes. And one of the things that was noticeable about the people that you could clearly see were going to win in Rio was that they were very rarely at the top of the timesheets in training, because they weren't concerned about where they ranked within the team. What they were concerned with was, did I do what I set out to do today? Did I try something today? Did I deliver the intensity I chose to deliver today? Did we try something and it didn't work? Great. We're at the bottom of the timesheet, but that doesn't matter, because this is not the test. This is the day that has advanced me. The flip side to that was these people who, you can be a world champion and be and not in the super champs group, but people who were motivated by the performance and the event over training. Training is just something I've got to get through to get to the event. Their locus of control was external. They were motivated by where they were in the team, forgetting that they're not racing the team, they're racing the Germans. And for them, success didn't come from within, which meant that they didn't know what was going to happen on the day. And there's an interesting challenge in that group, which is talent. Supremely talented people who haven't understood their talent have to keep hoping that the talent gods smile on them, because if they don't understand it, then when things aren't happening, they don't know what to do. So we can talk about a couple of mindsets. So there's another link to a paper here. Mark Jones is a sports psychologist who was interested in why are England so bad at penalties, and what is the impact of playing away. And when we talk, so the challenge mindset is something that's kind of seeped into a lot of our medical discussion, and Mark's work kind of underpins quite a lot of it. And the frame we talk about is your personal assessment of, do I have the resources to meet the challenge in front of me, in which case it feels like a challenge and I have confidence, or do I feel I don't have resources to meet this challenge and therefore it's a threat? And physiologically we're different, which is I think what Jeff was alluding to. Our mindset is different, our cortisol levels are different depending on how we frame the same challenge that's in front of us. They did a really great study where he took people who'd never done climbing and sent them to climb a climbing wall, and they watched a video beforehand which briefed them about what they were going to do. So the challenge is the same. And one group of people got told, okay, this is an assessment task, you'll have a fixed period of time. If we don't like what you're doing, we're going to stop you. It is quite dangerous, but if you fall, there'll be a mat on the floor, and we'll be judging you on a series of qualities. And the other group of people got told, you haven't climbed a climbing wall, but you've climbed other things like a climbing wall before, and this is a natural thing. Take your time, look at what's in front of you. We'll give you as long as you want. And we're really just focused on your overall experience of it. It's very safe. There's harnesses. So we're just interested to see what you can do. That second group of people who really just had the same task framed to them when they had the same resources but framed in a different way performed significantly better. And Mark talks about 3 components of the challenge mindset. What degree of confidence do I have? What degree of control do I think I have over what's going on? Jobs that maybe we don't perform so well, quite often it feels like we've become a bit of a passenger in this job. The environment is making me into this situation. I don't have control. That's one of the advantages of our stop and pause points, is it allows us to change the control dynamic in our challenge mindset. But priming, I think, is a really valuable skill. It's again something we need to work on beforehand. We need to think about and reflect. We need to think about, how am I going to frame the task in front of me in a way that enables me to have a challenge mindset? Because there are some inalienable facts. Like, we can't have another team. We are the team. The helicopter is going to land and we're going to have to deal with what we get to when we get there. But we've got that little window of time to frame what we're going to do in a way, we're not lying to ourselves, but in a way that enables us to go into a challenge mindset. Here's another little menu of things. We'll go into a couple of these. This is John Glenn. No, it's not, it's Alan Shepard. The first American in space. And I think his achievement is just significantly higher than Neil Armstrong. And obviously I'm an excellent judge of that, so they should take note. But the reason I think it's really impressive is that obviously Neil Armstrong was on Apollo 11, which means that at very minimum there'd been 10 other Apollos. But there'd also been the Gemini program, and before that, the Mercury program. So we had a reasonable understanding of like which bits should explode and which bits shouldn't, and which way it's going to go. And he was in a system. But Mercury was different. Mercury was JFK saying, you've got 10 years to get a man into space. Right, let's have an organization. What should we call it? Let's call it NASA. Right, we'll need someone to be in control of the missions. What should we call that? Okay, mission control. What does that look like? Not really sure. We got anything that goes into space? Well, we've got some ballistic missiles. Oh, okay. What's on the top of them? Nuclear weapons. Right, we'll take that off. What can we put on the top? Shed. Right, okay. So the first rockets were these Redstone nuclear missiles on which they basically put a little metal shed. And they had tested them, and some of them had gone up, and some of them had gone sideways. And some of them had just gone boom. And somehow, Alan Shepard needed to get into the mental space where he was willing to get into the shed on top of the nuclear missile and allow someone else to fire it, and trust and be confident so that he could execute what he needed to do. How did he do that? What he said was, I had total confidence that every single person in the program had learned rigorously and without personal pride from everything that had gone before. Confidence that is not built on foundations is called hubris, or hoping. And hoping and hubris are not strong strategies when you're going to do something where performance is important. What created robust confidence for him was the knowledge and the trust that people had made the right choices in terms of how they behaved to each other all the way through. One of the advantages of being a consultant, certainly in the hospital, is you run the sim. Let's do a teaching session. What should we talk about? Well, we'll talk about something I already know about. Thanks very much. Medicine is a confidence game. Paramedicine is a confidence game. I could quite easily dodge the opportunity to have my performance reviewed 10 times in a row, and people probably wouldn't notice. But I would know. I have the opportunity to not engage with honest debrief and personal reflection and learning, and no one else would know, but I would know. A good way to get athletes to do anything is to tell them to do what they want. So fatigue's really important this week. I think we really need to be in bed by 9:30. Oh, but I want to watch Netflix. Well, okay, watch Netflix. I mean, do we have to hope that the Germans now don't watch Netflix because we're giving them an advantage? But I'm sure they're not. You carry on. You watch Netflix. I'm really angry after the race. I want to punch the wall. Okay. But if we are going to choose to respond to adversity in that way, we've got to hope that our opposition also choose to not learn from the adversity. Coaches are bastards. But the point is that when you're on a performance journey, almost every decision you make either takes you towards your goal or away. Being brave and trying something new that might not work now to learn from it later is a brave thing to do. You could choose not to do it, but you're giving up an opportunity, you're moving away from your goal. And what's important is that when you sit on the start line, I want my athletes to look down and realize they're sitting on a massive pile of good decisions. But I want to look across at the Australians and the Americans and ask them the question, have you made as many good decisions as I have? That's robust confidence. Thought control's sounds a bit loopy, doesn't it? But the premise of this, Steve Peters' book, Chimp Paradox, is a useful primer to this kind of thought management, really. And the basic premise is this: the job of a sports psychologist is not to stop you having negative thoughts. It's not to stop you having anxious thoughts. It's not to stop your internal monologue pointing out when things are going really badly. Because quite often those things are based in truth. The skill, the muscle that you build, is the ability to manage and respond to those thoughts that your own internal monologue offers up to you. If you turn up, you've worked for 2 years, you've basically committed every morning and every evening for 2 years to get to the point where the national team might notice you, and you turn up and you're like, oh, marvellous, the Olympic champion next to me, where is the win here? That is not an unreasonable thought for your inner monologue to offer you. This person won a gold 2 years ago, and I'm a travel agent. There's truth in it. So you can't ignore it. So you have to develop strategies for taking those things and challenging the interpretation, not the thought itself. Yes, this person is the Olympic champion. 2 years have passed and I know what I have done and I know every good decision I've made, and I'm peaceful with what happens today because I'm going to put the best speed I can out there and I'm going to ask her to do the same, and if she doesn't, then I'm going to win. Different scenario, I've raced this same person 10 times, they've beaten me 10 times. You're going to lose today. This is going to be embarrassing. What is the point? Well, this is what I decided to do differently after last time. I have done it. I'm curious to know what happens this time. I'm happy I've got this person to compare with. I've missed 3 cannulas in a row. This is just not going to happen. When you walk in to cannulate someone and you've already decided it's not going to happen, you know it's not going to happen. But you can't pretend you haven't missed 3 cannulas in a row. Your job is not to ignore that. It's to go, hang on, let's put those 3 cannulas in the context of the 10,000 cannulas I've done. And this is the refresh I did afterwards, and this is what I'm going to do differently this time. I'm going to go and do it. The ability to live in the moment when you need to, I think, is so valuable. Rowing race takes about 250 strokes. If you're in the 17th stroke, you have to be absolutely in the 17th stroke. You have to execute the thing you're doing right now to the highest standard you could be, as if this was a competition for who can do the best 17th stroke. As if this was a competition for who can position the airway the best. As if this was a competition for the best wrapping of a line. And if the athlete takes their focus out of that stroke and into the next stroke, when they've not finished the one they're doing, it can be catastrophic. in terms of speed. So developing the muscle that allows you to place your attention where you want to be, not where people are trying to make it go, but where you want it to be, is hugely valuable, because you train on a beautiful bit of water. We go to Portugal where there's no one else there, and we practice to make perfection. And then you go to the World Cup, and the Russians are next to you, and they're banging the side of the boat in Russian. You've got to be able to place your focus, not just in your own boat, but in the stroke you're in. And the challenge to that is process versus outcome focus. Because lots of things in stressful environments draw our focus towards the outcome. Because outcomes are important. They're the reason we do it. We want the gold medal. We want the success. Outcomes are motivating. But trying to get the outcome doesn't get the outcome. If you're a quarter of the way into the race and the Germans are a length ahead of you and you have been trying, you can't try harder. That's not going to change anything. You've got to take your gold medal focus and deliver a gold medal release of the blade right now. A gold medal positioning of your body right now. And there's lots of circumstances in our world where we can get dragged into an outcome focus. And I think a really interesting example is laryngoscopy. So if you think back to when you were a novice laryngoscopist, what are some of the outcomes of your laryngoscopy that are important if you succeed or not? Yeah, why? Why is that important?
Because that's what you're training to do, and that's what the expectation on you is to get it done.
Yeah, everyone's expecting it's going to get done. What other outcomes might there be if we do or don't get this tube?
We'll get hit on the head by the anaesthetist.
Yeah, a patient might die. You might get assaulted. Yeah. Maybe even worse. Our sense of ourself, what am I here for? There's lots of reasons why the outcome is really important. And it's hard to take ourselves back to the first time we picked up a laryngoscope, but if you've trained someone recently, it's not unreasonable that the person who picks up the laryngoscope is thinking, right, I've just got to get the fucking view. Just got to see the view. I've got to see the view. And if you put the scope in and you don't see the view and you are outcome focused, the danger is that you try harder to get the view. You do the thing you're doing more because you're outcome focused. What would we advise these people to do? We'd advise you to take that gold medal desire and position the patient at that standard. Open the mouth at that standard. Place the blade in the mouth at that standard, because you have control over process. You don't have control over outcome. And the worse the situation gets, the more our inner monologue takes us to outcome, and the more we have to bring ourselves back to process. But not just process that we trust, because we have worked on it and we have read, we have understood, and that we have confidence in, that we have robust confidence in. So,
with the risk of derailing your process at the moment,
yeah.
Can I just ask, is that the difference between task fixation and focus?
No.
Whereas if you're trying to do something and you need focus, which can be described in other words maybe as task fixation, you lose potentially situational awareness. Whereas when you're process focused, you have the ability to be able to recognise where you are in the process of what you're doing, but also what's happening around you, like the Germans next to you, the Russians, and other things, rather than going down a rabbit hole of task fixation. Or is that a completely different?
It's a different thing. It's about being peaceful and having confidence that if I do each step in the process as well as I can, I'm confident that I'll get the outcome that's really important. So it's a way of maintaining your own performance in that moment. 100% mentality. So anyone who has seen The Apprentice will know that, is there an Australian Apprentice? Yeah. So when the Alan Sugar or the Donald Trump equivalent gives the really odious people the task that they've got to go and do, and they come back and they always go, I gave 100%, Sir Alan, I gave 110% to this task. And sometimes it can feel like, especially when you're in a high performance environment, that your job is to give 100% all the time. And that fails to take into account one of these basic principles of human factors we talked about at the start, which is that we are complex, variable people who do complex, variable work. So I've asked the same question from session one. Who here thinks the variation in their performance day to day is 1%? 5%? 20%? I don't know, like, I would be happy to look after me on my best day. I don't want to be looked after by me on my worst day. It's probably quite a lot of variation. And if we work in systems that require everyone to be 100% all the time, then our systems are probably not very good. The task and the skill is a different one. The skill is to be able to get 100% of what is available today. So if I'm having a 9 out of 10 day, I've got to get 100% of 9 out of 10. I'm reasonably sure it's 90%. If I'm having a 7 out of 10 day, I can't get cross about the fact that I'm not having a 10 out of 10 day, even if this is a stressful moment. My job is to get 100% of 7 and know that I'm in a team that has resilience and capacity and has trust. But if I get cross about not having a 10 out of 10 day, I'm going to deliver half of my 7, which I'm reliably assured is 35%. What other high-performance behaviours can athletes do when they're in a high-performance environment? Well, one is connectedness. It is really hard to go into an environment where you feel you are being measured and judged and where you are competing against these people, and yet somehow form relationships that are supportive of what you're doing, to be outward-looking, to use trust appropriately. Now, we don't have a competitive environment, but we do have a high-performance environment, and it is still an important skill to be able to maintain connectedness within that community. Because if you frame it like my emotional manipulation of the athletes, if you choose not to use the environment you're around, if you don't choose to use all the aspects of support that are available, then you really have to hope that the Germans have also chosen that. Because you are giving up an opportunity. You're giving up an advantage. And of course, every now and again, we go to the one patient that really needs every single ability that we've got. And we need to know that we have taken every opportunity that we can. So our behaviours in training create confidence and create our ability to deliver the skill of performance. Final mindset thought is this. There was 2 athletes in the team that had won gold at Rio and won gold at London before that. And every single thing, they had the best coach, and they had the best attitude. And I looked at them and I was like, what is your mindset? And I thought it was this: it's curiosity. They were constantly motivated to go, how good can I be today? What can I learn from this today? And that's not just in training. They were able to sit at the start line of the Olympic final and go, how good can I be today at doing the things that I have already established are the things that are going to get me what I want? They were curious to find out what was possible. And it enabled them to have a peaceful challenge mindset in moments of high stress. And that is something I try and think about in the helicopter on the way to a difficult job, is I'm curious to find out what I can do in this situation, and I'm curious to find out how well I can deliver the things that I want to deliver. I'm going to end, it's going to have to be another session, by showing you what happened next. So the team basically funded Charlotte and said to me, well, you have to, if you're going to coach with us now, you need to come in full time. So I'm the only person in the world, I think, to ever resigned from London Hems twice. So I ended my secondment a bit early, and Charlotte got paired with a second athlete.
This has got to be the Mighty Ducks finale, isn't it? This has got to be in Hollywood. Come on, we're going to give us the gold now, aren't we? Come on.
I think it's going to play. I've tried it before. And we went to the World Cup, which is in the most amazing, beautiful place in the French Alps called Aigues-Bellettes, which is this alpine lake, like the Lake of the Gods, to race the World Cup. Now, we're in 2014, so if you think we're halfway through the project, this is the point in the project we need to be racing internationally and doing well. But this was also my first full-time coaching gig, and it was Charlotte's first time in a double, remembering that the Olympic boat is a 2-person boat, and the GB1 boat had been selected. So that was the reigning Olympic champion and the person who was first in that pecking order, who'd been in that system and had been identified, and they were racing as GB1. Charlie and Ellie were there as GB2. Now, the goal we were given by the performance director was success here will be making the final. And everything else is gravy, but that's your goal. And this is the final. And they had already executed a lot of the things we've been working on to what I was really pleased with, was a really high standard, and they had made the final. They had beaten a ton of other countries' first boats, including Australia, and had
Including what, sorry?
including Australia. I've worked with the ECB, but you get the times. So I knew from the times that we had done well to make the final, and the way they rank the final is that the fastest boats go in the middle two lanes from the semis, and then it goes outwards. So we were one of the two slowest boats. GB2 in Sweden were the two slowest boats. We were on the outside. So if you think about the mindset that Charlie and Ellie might be in now, or that you'd want them to be in now, what would you say to them? We didn't really do like inspirational talks before you push them off, but like what would you say to them about what your mindset should be right now?
You've achieved your goal, go out and have fun, do the best you can, enjoy it, get into the flow state. There's a child in the hospital that really wants to win. I'm really in the hospital myself.
Yeah.
Don't give up right at the end. Before you go.
Yeah, don't give up at the end. That's a really good bit of advice. And very relevant in Australia. Yeah. I actually coached one of the athletes who was in the boat with the girl that laid down. And that's a whole nother story. What's the danger of saying that? You've achieved your goal. This is all brand. Have fun. What's the danger in terms of their performance?
They don't perform like they've been performing or trained to perform like.
Yeah.
Focus.
There's definitely a risk that you're basically saying this is as good as it can be. And so the curiosity is now stymied because it's not that we're not saying don't try, you're not saying that, and they would never interpret that. But there is a risk there, isn't there? Anyway, let's watch the race. Obviously that doesn't work. Oh, some shit, I can't remember now. Oh, my sound isn't going to work. I think I pressed something on the wall. We'll let them get started. Now I'm going to have to commentate. Is that button at the top making noise? Yeah, it is, isn't it? Rowing's a really terrible spectator sport because you stand in one place and you can't tell who's in front until they get next to you and you go, hey! And then you can't tell again.
I think the Germans are winning. Can't see anyone else.
Oh, I'm sad I can't.
Oh, shit, that guy's winning. He's got a money.
Oh, hang on. Who is that? Yeah. Fine. So you kind of get a free go for the first 100 meters because you've got no lactate in your system, so you go as hard as you can. The Canadians were in the final of the Olympics in 2012. They're a much more experienced crew, an older crew. China, basically, you never know what you're going to get with China because they compete internally the whole year. You never see them, but China's got a solid program. All of these athletes have raced at the World Championships the year before, except for Charlie and Ellie. You can see them on the far side. Parallax error is tricky, but it's going to scroll back in a little minute. You can actually see Great Britain won.
Is there something else I can help with?
Yeah, turn the sound on. That. You can actually see Great Britain won are kind of back, but we know, because we know from training, that Great Britain won are really fast in the second half. So, but the field is spreading out, and you can kind of see, let's pause at this point. They're doing all right, aren't they? They are in this final with all these crews that are objectively better than them and were faster than them in all of the semis. And we're coming up to the first timing marker on the left here. We're minute 40 in, and they're kind of in the game, aren't they? They're probably second. So what would you say to them now?
Kill the Germans.
There's still 3/4 of this race to go, and it's great because obviously we love watching rowing. But so you've done the bit where you fly out the front. The commentator, if we could hear them, would be saying that quite often the slower crews will absolutely smash at the beginning and try and hold on, but that's not how the racing works. So quite often you do see the slower crews show in the front at the beginning, and the commentator will be saying that the crews that are going to win this are the ones who are being efficient and racing the whole race. But you'd be pretty pleased, wouldn't you? You'd be going, we're not embarrassing ourselves here. So, and you can see Sweden on this side are kind of doing that as well. But they're a very experienced crew. So Sweden won the World Silver Medal the year before. So they're very good. So there's Charlie Ellie on the far side, and you kind of see that they're relaxed, they're moving freely. As the coach, you'd be pretty happy that they're moving the boat well. But we have never been in this situation. So we're in front now, and you've got to think, maybe this is it. Maybe we do have more speed than we had before. And you start to the danger is you start to drift towards outcome. Hang on, there's only 3 minutes of this left, and we're in a bronze medal position here. This could be good. And it's probably a confidence boosting thing to some extent, isn't it? You go, right, keep going what we're doing. There is a bit of parallax error here still, but can you see what's happening with 3 and 4? They're coming. How do you think it feels when you're on the limit and slowly people are coming back on you? Is it better to be in front and see that happen? So what thoughts would your subconscious be starting to offer up to you now if you are new to this, everyone else is objectively better than you got out to a lead, and now the grown-ups are coming? What do you think your...
That's who you are.
Yeah, well, try and place yourself in their shoes, because they're young athletes, but they're pretty good.
Again, if you're a vulnerable person, they're catching me. If you're a dog, you just go, you are not catching me.
So you'd use what's happening as motivation, but you're saying you're not catching me, and they are catching you. So what happens now? Because that's the danger with that, isn't it? That you go, right, I'm just going to try harder because I'm not going to let this happen, and yeah, it is happening. Right. It's changed again. So we've now gone through the middle of the race. You can see them on the far side. 40 seconds ago, they were between first and second. Now, they're fifth. In fact, the only company they've got is the Canadians out the back. So what suddenly has happened now to your mindset at this point? Yeah, and you're an athlete, aren't you? Have you been there?
Oh yeah, I've competed at the world level. Yeah, you can hang on to you like, but then eventually the rubber band will snap and it's all over.
Yeah, and there's that, and the danger is that there's that bit. Yeah, the danger is that bit where you know it's going to happen, but it's not happened yet.
Yeah.
Hey, that's not a sport.
You can hang on as long as you want.
Yeah. And there's a question that you also ask, which is, have I paid out too much in the first half? Is this now going to be not just an explosion, but a failure? And of course, at the beginning of this, we've been told by the PD that your goal is just to get to there.
Is there also a physiological falling where you're just going, the lactate's now going through the roof, I'm now struggling to breathe, my legs now starting to fucking hurt, I'm trying, I can give it another couple of percent. That's what I said, advantage to a person, you are like, people, if this level, you'll go and see people how to hurt themselves more, and just it's who you are more. Yeah. There is a famous saying, probably not appropriate, but yeah, it's who you are. Internally.
That's not going to work, don't worry. Yeah, I did test it.
And that's a function of your training and your experience and all that stuff that Sean was talking about before. But yeah, an amazing thing that it's who you are want to do. That's my sort of knowing. Well,
if it all goes right, you feed out the power knowing exactly how much you've got, isn't it? That's the perfect race. You don't get to have the perfect race all the time. Oh, there we go.
Important then. The commentators are calling out the team by individual names, not by the team.
It's unhelpful, isn't it?
It's like they're going the Olympic champion. She's rowing really well, and not talking about a fucking teammate in the thing.
Yeah, it's brutal, isn't it? So we're now in this is the denouement of the race. So somewhere between 1,250 meters gone and 1,500 meters gone is where you have to start deciding to empty the tank, because you are running out of strokes to make a difference. If you think about the actual way you might go faster, is you've got to go further for a stroke than the opposition, and the closer you get to the end, the more that delta would need to be to make it up, and you're already in the hole. And at this level, you don't really get significant changes in speed in these last bits. So you go through 1,500 meters, there's a minute left in this race, and it's kind of set now generally. And you'd say you'd be pretty happy being GB1. They're confident, they've got good speed, they can see what's going on. Germany have come through, the Germans. They have an ex-Olympic champion in there. They have clearly played this race really well. And Sweden, who are on the near side, well, we talked about the slower crews who fly and die, but they have flown and held on. And you know what? They're a really experienced crew, so you can expect that. And you can just see Charlie and Ellie, the bow of their boat, off the screen. So what you're the risk of your inner monologue now is that the outcome is gone. Can I refocus on this whole, it was good to get here goal? Can I avoid embarrassment? It's potentially some thoughts that your subconscious might offer up. T-shirts. Yeah. The British coaches were delighted with that.
Do they ever vomit?
Yeah. Yeah. Lots. That video that, when I was just showing you some of the training that we went through back at the beginning of that program, that first video of Charlie on the River Thames at the top of the river doing intervals of overpace work again and again and again and again were that last 100 meters. What we set out to do was understand her strengths and then build total confidence in her strengths. And we knew her strengths were the ability to go deeper than anyone else and to do it right when you're deep. And to give her the robust confidence to then deploy that when it really counted. So, next topic for discussion another time is high performance culture. But I think we've looked at some different tools that you can put in your box, that you've got to practice, that you've got to build confidence in, but that can make a big difference to your ability to do what you need to do when you need to do it. Apologies again for the timing.
Cool. Thank you very much.